All right, well, good morning. I guess good afternoon for our fellow East Coasters, and welcome to our third and final LinkedIn Live session around AWS data protection. My name is Sam Nichols. I'm principal within our public cloud organization, and I am joined by David Hill, friend, colleague, co-presenter. We've presented probably 100 plus times this year together, David. So many times we can finish each other's sentences, but I'll let you go and introduce yourself.
You missed compatriot as well.
Oh, compatriot too, yeah.
Yeah, welcome. I'm David Hill, global technologist in Veeam's product strategy group, not public strategy as it says on the screen today. Very much product strategy. So, but I do work on the public clouds. I work on cloud native stuff. So all the big public clouds, Kubernetes, the developments and deployments and stuff like that. So welcome. Sam and I are both very British, but loving life in America.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't we actually bring up a map? This is something that we do on these sessions where we see where you guys are tuning in live from. So right now we've got myself in Wisconsin. I'm right on the border of Minnesota, about 25 miles out of Minneapolis-St. Paul, where it just snowed for the first time this season about 30 minutes ago. So ready for the winter. David, you're from Texas, right? Well, you live in Texas now.
Texas, no snow here. It's still like 90 degrees, so can't fault the weather in Texas. I don't think it's ever snowed where I
am. Lucky man. And then our production guy is just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. So in the comment section, type in where you're from. We'll bring this up in 5-10 minutes or so, see where everyone is tuning in from, city and state, if you want to throw that in there. Again, thanks for joining us. This is a 3-part series around AWS data protection. So in part number 1, a couple of weeks back, Dave and I discussed the shared responsibility model, what that means for you guys as consumers of AWS, and kind of where the delineation between responsibility starts and ends, what you're still responsible for, and ultimately you're still responsible for the data and really why you need to back up. Last week, we spoke about how to drive and be as cost-effective as possible as you can in AWS. Really, we went through 5 key tips, or rather, I went through 5 key tips as we had some more technical difficulties, and David dropped off last week. But we went through 5 tips on how to cut costs, and now we're going to talk about data mobility and data portability, really between AWS, other clouds, and on-premises. And if we bring up a slide here where we really kind of discuss the changing landscape to be protected, right? And where workloads are today and where they're going to be in the next couple of years. In lime green, you can see where those are today, and in that seafoam color is where they're going to be in the next couple of years. So on the left-hand side, no surprise, physical server utilization is on a relatively rapid decline. Our virtual machines on premises are remaining relatively static over the next couple of years. And then we continue to see that rapid adoption of cloud-hosted VMs over the next couple of years. So, David, you talk with customers more than I do. What are you seeing when it comes to folks, either migrating production workloads from on-prem to the cloud, or cloud kind of becoming the de facto standard when it comes to new applications?
Yeah, you touch on a good point there. Certainly, obviously, the physical servers is no surprise. That's been on a downward trend for the past 10, 12 years, obviously, with virtualization. But from a public cloud perspective, what we're actually seeing is the majority of businesses now taking a cloud-first approach. And with the whole COVID-19, the world's gone mad situation, this is rapidly accelerated as well. So when you think about what's actually happening out in the real world is data centers, people aren't able to get in them anymore. So obviously the world went into lockdown, obviously being British, living in America, both countries, you couldn't leave your home for a while. You couldn't go into buildings. You weren't allowed to socialize. So then how were you able to replace hard drives and resolve networking issues when you're actually physically locked down in your home? And this is where the public cloud and scalability of the public cloud came to the forefront during this pandemic. And when we see this adoption, I would actually bet that those numbers have even changed now since that survey was done. And I bet the public cloud is even higher than that 41% now, because within, it says there within 2 years. But when you think about how this was come about with this year, it'll have grown phenomenally. And it's interesting that the virtual machines are staying the same. And I'm seeing that a lot when I talk to customers is they're not planning on like de-investing in their infrastructure in their data centers, but they're also not planning on reinvesting. So the infrastructure will stay over the next 2 years. Typically, when you think about data centers, people invest in these environments in a 3, 4, 5 year plan. So they'll start their investment, they'll buy all the hardware, the infrastructure, their storage arrays, their physical servers to run their vSphere environment. So it's no surprise it's that static. But the public cloud aspect is where the big changes are coming. And that's mainly because of this cloud first approach now, mainly because of the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you bring up some great points, and you only have to look at the the last quarter's earnings reports from the big public cloud vendors just to see how much it has taken off in just this year. Again, driven by the unfortunate pandemic. I mean, I've worked with a number of customers at Veeam that, like David mentioned, are worried that they can no longer go into their office and physically be there to manage and maintain this infrastructure. And then in a proactive move, nothing's necessarily gone wrong, but in a proactive move have taken these, tier one applications and moved them into the public cloud. And they're just running there now because they can just access anything and everything from where they are at home. We're going to go and dive in a little bit around some of the key things around what is a modern data protection solution? What are some of its capabilities in just a moment? Before we do that, I do want to bring up that we do have a Amazon gift card raffle going on. So we have 7 gift cards available up to a $250 value that you can enter to win. David's pointing to the QR code right on the screen. He's got it down this time. Like we had some difficulties the first 2 times around, but he's pointing right at it. So you can scan that with your phone. It'll bring up a page. You can just register there and be entered into that raffle. I believe we'll be announcing the winners on Monday. Alternatively, in the chat thread, you should see the link that you can just kind of click on with your computer right there. So before we dive into some of those kind of modern data protection essentials, let's just jump back to the map and see where we've got people coming, tuning in from.
Oh, look at that.
Going to be a real test of our geography there. So it looks like New York, Massachusetts, California, Colorado. That East Coast one's escaped me. I would have failed it. If I had to take my citizenship test again, I probably would have failed. New Jersey is there as well. Fantastic. So keep those coming in. We'll revisit that in 5 minutes or so and see who else is joining and where you're joining from. So we've got another slide to share with you around, what does modern data protection look like? We went out and did our annual data protection report and released it in June, where we go out and ask a number of Veeam customers and non-Veeam customers kind of what would you consider the defining aspects of modern data management and data protection. And we've got the top, I believe that's 9 responses on the screen here. And what I've highlighted are some of the key ones when it comes to the cloud, right? More than half of these kind of essentials are very much focused on the cloud, right? So no surprise, the ability to do disaster recovery via a cloud service. In second, the ability to move workloads from on-premises to the cloud. So again, that was kind of just that general trend that we were talking about earlier that has been rapidly accelerated by the pandemic. The third one is also pretty interesting as well, right? The ability to move workloads from one cloud to another. And then moving a little bit further down the list, but by no means, not a priority, the ability to standardize protection of on-premise with IaaS and SaaS policies, right? The way that you would go about protecting a physical machine, a virtual machine, and a cloud native workload or a cloud VM, they're all very different workloads that live in different infrastructures, and the way that we protect and manage them are all very different. And that typically results in us using these disparate tool sets or solutions, sometimes from different vendors, that can make the management and protection of that data a real headache. So, David, what are some of your key pieces of advice when it comes to being able to move workloads, whether that's from on-prem to the cloud, from one cloud to another, but then also making sure that you have this common control plane to manage all of these workloads, regardless of what environment they're in?
Yeah, you just answered your own question there, Sam. That's well done. So
just making it easy for you, mate.
Yeah, exactly. So, but no, it's a great point to have when you're talking about that common control plane. And when we're talking about migrating workloads across different platforms, it's important to have the actual tools that can actually understand the different platforms as well. So when you think about like data protection and disaster recovery as a typical example, just being able to fail over from, say, like vSphere to vSphere is the traditional way that we've been doing disaster recovery for the past 10 years. Now, with that public cloud offering and people looking at this cloud-first approach, you can leverage the cloud as more of a insurance policy because you're not paying for the services until you actually use them. So it's very different way of thinking about it. And when you think about just being able to migrate workloads, if you want to take a vSphere VM and go and restore it into AWS or you restore it into Microsoft Azure, the platforms, the underlying hypervisors are fundamentally different. You know, you've got vSphere on-prem, and then you have something like, obviously Azure isn't using vSphere, it's using a special flavor of Hyper-V. AWS is using a completely different hypervisor there. It's like some crazy version of Zen. So when you think about what we're actually doing, taking a virtual machine that's running on vSphere and then moving it and converting it to be able to run on a different platform and being able to just right click on a backup and say, restore this to any other platform, whether it be AWS, Azure, Nutanix, anything like that, is very powerful. So from that migration piece and that cloud mobility piece, being able to move those workloads around, and it works the other way as well. You can take backups of your workloads in AWS and Azure and simply bring those back on-prem. Why would you want to do that? Well, disaster recovery is the most obvious one. You know, you've lost your data center, it's up in smoke, it's 3 a.m. in the morning, and you want to be able to just restore these and get these services up quickly. But also, maybe you want to move these workloads because you're having latency issues. You know, whoever designed the application and deployed the application may not have thought about things like authentication issues or latency issues or anything like that, or even security and compliance. So being able to just take some backups of those workloads, right click on them and say, go restore them to a vSphere VM, or do things like instant VM recovery, where you can literally spin up a virtual machine on vSphere, stream it out of AWS S3 object storage, and have that VM up and running on that vSphere host within seconds, rather than waiting to move the data around. So there's a lot of options. But when we kind of look at those slides, the biggest one is infrastructure and networking outages, and that's what drives a lot of these. You know, I've been an IT support and guy and architect for 20 years, and you know, you can always rely on the fact that it's the network's fault. It's never anything I've done; it's always the network's fault. So, being able to just restore to a different platform, different environment is very powerful.
Yeah, so I think, you know, you bring up some great points, and I think the points that you're making very much point back to the Veeam platform, right? We have this ability to essentially help you back up, recover, and migrate to, from, and within any environment, right? Again, physical, virtual, vSphere, Hyper-V, AHV, AWS, Azure. Veeam's approach is as prescriptive as possible, right? We don't want to be here telling you that, you know, you should be putting your data in, you know, X infrastructure or Y infrastructure. Ultimately, it is your data. We want to empower you with the tools to, you know, ultimately have that data live where it makes sense for your organization today. But then as your organization's strategy might shift over the next, few months, 6 months, 12 months, whether that is, purely maybe a monetary shift or something that's been influenced by the pandemic, we just ultimately give you that tool set that will help you move those workloads across the platform that best makes sense for your organization. And I think kind of from a technological perspective, one of the things that enables that is our VBK file format, right? It's this nondescript, self-describing backup file format that's pretty much used by all of our solutions. David, do you want to enlighten us more about the VBK format?
Yeah, so one of the key differentiators from a Veeam perspective is our portable data format. So you talk about the VBK, and that's obviously the Veeam backup file. And that allows you to take the backups of any workload that we support. So whether it be physical, virtual, the different hypervisors, Hyper-V, Nutanix, AHV, vSphere, those kind of things, all go into this VBK, which is that portable data format. And because of that, we're able to just then use that and migrate these workloads and essentially recover these workloads to any platform. When we look at AWS and Azure as well, with things like Veeam Backup for AWS and Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure, we use a similar format. So what we call OVBK, so object storage VBK. So we store the backups in object storage for that cloud platform. So obviously AWS is S3 object storage, Azure is Azure Blob Storage. And then between them, with the integration into Veeam Backup and Replication, with these VBKs and this portable data format, we can simply just go and restore a virtual machine wherever we want. Now, the other great thing about that data format is the ability that we actually have that we can, because we understand the data in there, we can actually do like scans of data with like data labs and secure restore and stuff. So you can even restore your backups and then scan for viruses, ransomware, that kind of thing in a staging environment before it goes anywhere near your production environment as well. So it's very powerful and it's very flexible. But the other thing I want to kind of say when we're talking about some of the power with Veeam is you don't even need to be a Veeam customer to get some of the power of this. We have like the Veeam Backup and Replication Community Edition, which is a free version. We have Veeam Backup for AWS, which you can leverage the free version and back up to 10 instances completely free. There's no charges for that. So, and same with Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure as well. So when we're looking at that and we're talking about this data portability, you don't actually have to come and buy anything from Veeam. You can leverage some of the power of the Veeam platform completely free as well. And I would look into that. If you're looking at moving workloads around, you're living in this multi-cloud world and it's becoming a challenge, and you're not a Veeam customer, you're just trying to find out what's going on in the world, go and have a look at those community editions and free editions, and then you can try these products and see how it works and how it fits and how flexible it is as well.
Yeah, you made some great points from a technological perspective on how Veeam enables this, ultimate flexibility on where you put your data and give you the tools to do it. And while that absolutely is a large technological feat that we've delivered to you, I think it's also pretty important to talk about it from a licensing schema as well. And David knows how much I love to talk about licensing.
I do love licenses.
Yeah, you mentioned multiple products as part of our platform, right? Veeam Backup and Replication, Veeam Backup for AWS, Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure. Typically, when you utilize a tool set or a solution within a vendor's portfolio, you have licenses that are specific to each of these products, right, or solutions. And Veeam has this thing called the Veeam Universal License, which is ultimately a license file that is just as portable, just as flexible as you need the data to be, right? It's not specific to any one product within our portfolio. It can be used to license almost any product within the Veeam portfolio. So as you are protecting the data at its original source, let's just call it a vSphere VM on premises, and then you're using a Veeam Universal license to license the protection of that workload, and then you need to move it to AWS and ultimately continue to protect it in AWS. You don't need to go out and procure new licenses and have these old licenses become redundant. The license just moves with the workload, right? So again, it's just as much a technological feat, but it's also a licensing schema feat. So, just giving you the tool set to just do whatever makes sense for your business as cost effectively as you possibly can. And, going back to what we were talking about earlier, we've spoken with a number of customers that, the lockdown started to happen. They were worried about what would happen if something, occurred on premises where they weren't able to go into the office and, remediate that challenge. They just used Veeam to proactively move those tier 1, tier 2 applications from, an on-premise VM into AWS. AWS was now powering those production workloads. They still used Veeam to protect that data while it was living in AWS. And then ultimately, when lockdowns are ending, people can start coming back into the office. They have this decision to make, right? Do they want to continue to run it in AWS? If so, they can continue doing so using that same license file, same vendor to protect the workload in AWS, or do they want to bring it back on premises? And again, we can absolutely help them do that. So, we've spoken about the mobility perspective, but one of the other points on the slide that we showed you about, standardizing protection between on-prem and IaaS and SaaS policies, and really delivering a common control plane. We launched Veeam Backup and Replication 10A middle to end of August. At times just blurring into one with this crazy year. But middle to end of August, we released 10A, and that ultimately delivered the AWS native backup and recovery capabilities David was talking about with Veeam Backup for AWS into Veeam Backup and Replication. So again, we are delivering that common control plane, that single pane of glass, dare I say, to again manage your on-prem workloads, physical or virtual, but also your AWS protection with a purpose-built tool set directly within Veeam Backup and Replication. Is there anything you'd like to add around that, David?
Yeah, you make some really good points again. You always do, Sam. I don't even need to turn up. You're just that good at making points. But when we're looking at this multi-cloud world that we live in, we're doing a conference next week, Veeam Live, and this isn't your traditional technology conference. It's more of a forward-looking what's going on in the world. And I actually have a session where I'm presenting with an analyst from the Evaluator Group. And one of the top things that they're finding is that people want this single pane of glass. And, companies and software vendors have been talking about single pane of glass for 10, 15 years. It's like the utopia of software. I have a single pane of glass, don't worry about it. But it's actually very true. When you look at it from a Veeam perspective, having a data management platform where you have one console, one area where you go and manage all your data, all your environments, everything is essentially what Veeam is building. And we've seen this is what enterprises want just from the information from these analysts and the surveys that they do. So it's very interesting that you talk about that. So from the cloud native perspective, the ability to actually inbuild that's a new word, build into the Veeam Backup and Replication the ability to natively go and back up AWS workloads just by adding a managed server the same way that you add a vCenter or you add Hyper-V or whatever you are adding into VBR. You can do the same with the AWS platform now. Makes it very, very powerful. So you don't have multiple consoles. You don't have to go out to different marketplaces, install different products and different appliances. It's all just delivered through that one single pane of glass. And that's very important as well when you're looking at traditional backup marketplace as well. We have a lot of competition with hardware. A lot of our competitors have hardware devices that you have to install in the data center. Not very software defined, so it can make it a bit of a challenge when you're looking at protecting public clouds. Veeam obviously is fully software defined. Everything we do is just software. You install Veeam backup and replication, and then you just drive everything from there. So you don't need to worry about hardware. You don't need to worry about data centers. You don't need to worry about deploying all these different products as you go along. So makes it very simple, very powerful. And of course, being native to that particular platform that you're protecting makes it very easy to not only protect those workloads, but to recover them as well.
Fantastic points. And we're kind of getting close to the end of our 30 minutes. So that means that it is plug time. So David, get your magic finger ready. Time to point one more time.
Right again. Come on,
it's not even up on the screen yet. You're that good.
Oh, there it is. See,
so you can register to win one of 7 Amazon gift cards, up to $250 in value. Just simply scan that, or we've got the link in the chat thread as well that you can go and click on that. Just simply put in your reg details, and I believe we'll be announcing the 7 lucky winners on Monday. So make sure you get your opportunity in there. A couple more plugs. David mentioned about Veeam Live starting next week. So absolutely make sure you're registered to join that. It's 100% virtual, 100% live, and 100% free. So you can get some great information on cloud data management there. Veeam's Rick Vanover, who I'm sure you will know and love, will also be doing a LinkedIn Live recap, I believe at the same time next Friday. And on Monday, we have a very special LinkedIn Live. For those that don't know, we recently acquired Kasten. Kasten is the market leader in Kubernetes and container backup, recovery, application mobility. So we have Gaurav Rishi joining us for a LinkedIn Live session all around containerization and how you can back up, recover, and move applications within different containerized environments. So make sure you tune in for that one next Monday. So that draws us to a close, not only for this session, but for this series. Definitely hope you enjoyed it. Trust that you did. If there's anything that you do want to watch, these 3 sessions are available on demand. Again, the first one was all around shared responsibility and some best practices when it comes to backup. Second one was great, discussing cost effectiveness, 5 awesome tips to help you keep those costs low in AWS. And then, of course, today we have discussed all around how you can move data between all of these different infrastructures that you have, completely eliminate those complexities and challenges of managing your hybrid and multi-cloud environment. So thank you from me. David, any closing words from you?
Yeah, all I would say is go try out those free editions if you're not a Veeam customer. If you are a Veeam customer, make sure you upgrade to 10A, and then you'll obviously be able to start looking at protecting your workloads across all these different platforms as well. And thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Always good to listen to some British guys.